guess like another way to thread the needle, Vince, and you're right. I think up until now we've been talking about the intersection of these two spaces abstractly, would be ask a little bit more of a pointed question, which is, what if we took Dharma and DAOs and we put them together? What if one was to form a SanghaDAO? In the crypto space, it's taken as an article of faith that a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, which is just basically a new way of incorporating and connecting people, is going to replace the corporation, is going to replace foundations. And the reason for that is that it's a new way of financing an organization via smart contracts and managing the interests of all members of the organization, possibly using tokens. And I'd encourage the audience to think about tokens in the abstract and not the shilly 2017 ICO boom, which were also tokens, but it was a different evolutionary thrust towards, I think, more greed than values-oriented communities. And so there's this idea of digital organizations are going to be the new way that we associate with each other online. And what's cool about them is that they're completely global in jurisdiction. So if we were to incorporate a Sangha in Colorado, where I'm from, or on the East Coast where you're from, if you're participating from across the world, you don't have as many property rights or rights to if you would have to fly to America to sue us. And then also wait in through our complicated and sometimes messed up court system. Whereas using a digital organization, it's quite easy to arbitrate a dispute via a smart contract that has rules for how disputes happen. And one of the most exciting things about a smart contract based DAO is that there's this primitive of a rage quit or a fork where I can take my share of the DAO and I can take my ball and I can go home at any time. And so it enables that sort of rapid evolution via forkability. And these are all sort of the things that are a reason why people in the crypto space, I think, take the idea that DAOs are going to be the future of human organization to the next level and experiment with actually making their organizations DAOs. I'm curious for you, from the other side of the DAO Dharma looking glass, Vince, and your experimentations with digital Dharma with Buddhist Geeks. How does that sound to you? What do you think the opportunities there are? What are the threats? And are we really going to bring up some strange conversations by trying to combine economic liberation from with the Dharma? What is the relationship that we're exploring there?
Gosh, yeah. I really see there's a potential integration there. Shinzen Young, who's one of my favorite meditation teachers, he's a Westerner who's trained in Japan, in Japanese monasteries. He talks about the difference between happiness that's dependent on conditions and happiness that's independent of conditions, or unconditional happiness. And Buddhism traditionally is primarily focused on the happiness which is independent of conditions. It's like, can you discover some freedom that's durable enough that it isn't impacted by anything?
Right. Do you think there's a funnel there where basically if enough people achieve economic liberation, they've got happiness that's dependent on their situations, then they're in a place of privilege where they can discover the happiness independent of conditions. There's like a funnel there.
I think it tends to work that way. Yeah. When people get everything they want conditionally and they're still unhappy, then they start to go, wait, what's wrong? and they start to kind of get into like, what is the source of this fundamental dissatisfaction that I have with things, no matter how things are going?
By the way, technology founder, CEO here to report for dissatisfaction when you achieve all material success.
Yeah, CEOs have to.
Guilty over here.
CEOs are the worst. We're the worst because we're the most dissatisfied that we have to do something about it.
Yeah, tell me about it.
It's true. So there's this sort of fundamental dissatisfaction. I want to maybe just digress for a second. So there's the happiness dependent on conditions and independent. To me, if you bring them together, it's ideal. Get your needs met and be okay with things as they are. And be, to me, that's just the most resilient combination. Buddhism traditionally was evolved in a monastic environment where people were dropping out of society and they were trying to live off of very little. So they were trying to become independent of the social systems and find this happiness independent of conditions.
Hmm.
So to me, there's also a parallel here where I think the opportunity that I see that's really exciting is for alternative communities to
Mm.
emerge, like alternative
Hmm.
living, where people are buying into a different conception of what the good life means and have ways to actualize that using their
Hmm.
technology.
Yeah, and with peer support, a Schelling point for the hopeful, for people who want to create a reinforcing cycle between dependent happiness and independent happiness and discover it together, but in
Yeah.
a digital first way, I think
Yeah. Yeah. And
is
maybe
kind of
that
what I
that
see.
leads, yeah, digital first, because that's what everyone can access.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh
I
yes,
see that
and
as a potential.
oh yeah, and I mean, like I have to say that I am extremely privileged to be here in Boulder, Colorado, and to be a technology entrepreneur and to have access to this technology and to your
Yeah.
podcast, Vince. I've been listening for a decade. I think it's really incredible what you've done to make the Dharma accessible, and the internet could do in order to bring that message to people who are less privileged and need a source of hope in a kind of fucked up world.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, the highest hope that I have for something like this idea would be that people are able to use DAOs to
Hmm.
have genuine alternate social experimentation,
Yeah.
and the data of which could be rolled back into how other people, other networks or communities choose to live. You know, that there's some
Hmm.
sharing of wisdom,
Right.
um, borderless, open sharing of wisdom across networks.
Hmm.
Because I think the Buddhist framework, which includes a lot of different things, it is a
Hmm.
really interesting way to live for some folks,
Hmm.
um, and to actually have economics or governance
Hmm.
that is intentionally tied to that or integrated. I think that's really exciting. I also see that as the biggest, that's probably the biggest hurdle or challenge in this whole thing, is how do
Hmm.
you actually self-govern
Hmm.
well, and how do you deal
Yeah.
with the influx of value, you know, and the growing of value and the sharing of value,
Yeah.
you know, in ways that
Yeah.
people just don't become total assholes.
Yeah. Yeah. Or monopolize it for themselves.
Right.
I think is a question
I.e.
as well.
total assholes.
Yeah. Well, I also think there's a point of opportunity here where, as humanity increasingly moves online, we used to be in these local communities that were driven by our where we went to church, or where we
Mm-hmm.
went to school and what our workplace was, and now the world is completely being indexed online, where where a lot of the connections that you make are based off of your interests or your hobbies or your
Right.
world beliefs, and but it allows us to completely aggregate online. And so the great
Mm.
potential I see of what you pioneered, Vince, with digital Dharma is that there are probably budding Buddhists all over the world that want to have access to the Dharma, and need a way to participate in not just media about the Dharma, but all those other things you said,
Yeah.
governance,
Community
economics,
engagement. Oh
yeah,
yeah. There you
in a
go.
much deeper way. And the fiat banking system just does not allow that. And I think that a Buddhist SanghaDAO could be a Schelling point for these people to find each other and to build the social relationships, the culture, and a just sort of a community around these common interests. And it could be
Yeah.
a bigger thing than big is not always the metric of success, and we should be careful about that, but it could
Right.
be a bigger network than any local sangha could be, because the
Sure.
internet indexes all the way across the world. And that does not mean it's better, and I want to be very careful about saying
Yeah.
that,
The
but
long
I think that,
Buddhist tail is not necessarily better, but it's bigger.
yeah, yeah, for sure.